Hey everyone, Phlashweb here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how you get better quality leads for your business coming up. So this video really came about as a result of a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago with a client who was explaining that basically 50% of the leads that he seemed to be getting were just total garbage. So I thought I'd share the conversation we went through, and essentially I went through the process of how he can start to improve his lead situation. And one of the first things I thought was very relevant to mention was that if you're getting 50% garbage leads, you probably need to do something with the targeting you've got for your particular client that you're going out to reach, right? So like if 50% of his leads, or at least a percentage of that chunk, are people that are not really there or not really interested in the service or aren't the right people for him, then he's probably not reaching the right people in the first place, right? So he needs to do something, or you would need to do something in that case, to refine your targeting so that you're hitting more of the right sort of people. And that comes down to your client avatar, essentially, like who is your client avatar, and refining that, because and then obviously refining the targeting of your marketing, because it's not enough to know who it is, you need to be able to reach them. So, and that should be a continuous process, by the way. Refining your avatar, it's not something you do once at the start of business. It's ongoing, right? You should have a system whereby you're maintaining all the details, and you can have like child avatars of the main one that you think, actually this guy's a slight variant on that, and you refine it as you go, because it's important to keep that up to date as you either understand the audience better or you find new ones. So that's the first thing. The second thing I wanted to, well, I sort of explained to him broadly, was that he needs to do a few pre-qualification steps. The first one is less of a qualification step, more of a awareness step, I suppose, which is on his page he basically had quite a vague offering on his service, which meant that people didn't really know. They sort of thought, oh, his offering was around computing, and they sort of thought, oh, this guy can do, you know, anything to do with computing, right? And so he was getting all kinds of different leads. He actually had quite a specific service, but he was trying to do a lot with that service, and you know, he didn't want to sort of turn away business. But I said, well, you sort of do turn away business when you speak to them on the phone, right? Because it's not relevant. So I said, so part of his work, it was going to be, or in fact Jade was going to pick some of that up, was that he was going to look at how he refines the message when people get to his site to contact him, right? So that they could do the pre-qualification for themselves, right? If it matched their requirements, then they could give him a call. So that was the first part of that pre-qualification setup. The second thing was, and it's not really relevant to this guy, but it's worth bearing in mind if you are in this position, is in some cases where you've got a marketing campaign going and you've got, say, a higher ticket item product, then it's worthwhile considering some sort of pre-qualification form, or some sort of a slightly higher barrier to accessing you as a lead, because you want to make sure that this person's really serious before you spend your time. Let's say you're a solopreneur and you're selling training business or training courses or something like that, and your training courses are a good premium ticket item, and you don't necessarily want to be having like 50 phone calls a day with people that aren't really that interested in, like, wow, that's expensive or something, you know. So you can set up like a pre-qualification before you even get to the qualification stage. That's another thing you could potentially do. I wouldn't suggest that for lower ticket things, or things where you are actually dealing with sort of quantity to lower percentage kind of sales or customers. So the third thing you can do is look at pre-qualifying the leads before you talk to them. So this guy's issue was that he was spending like half of his day talking to people that weren't relevant to his business, right? So the third thing you can do, and this is more like qualifying leads in a typical sense, because this guy was talking about how he spent like 50% of his day, half of his day, near enough, talking to people that weren't relevant, and he's killing a load of time, because it does take time to speak to some of the leads. You want to understand what their need is, and so he was sort of upset that he spent so much time not talking to quality leads, which is hence the whole conversation. So a step before it reaches you, if you're a solopreneur and you're spending your time doing all your leads, is to get somebody to qualify them for you. It's something that you probably need to build into your process, but you can get somebody on board that essentially understands your service to the point where they can have a conversation that's, you know, lightweight, just to understand their requirements, that's very quick to respond to the lead, because that's something that's very important, and that they can then sort of convey, okay, yeah, we can book you in for a more detailed conversation with whoever, and find out whether this person's legitimate, do a little bit of research maybe on their business and see if they are a good fit. And that can save you a serious amount of time, and you can get much better quality leads when you do the talking. And the last thing I wanted to mention was sort of related to the first thing, in terms of the site copy and the site message that you're demonstrating, or you're putting out there in terms of doing the qualification before it reaches anyone. And that is, in many cases, or it's ideal if this is the case, you want to try and touch point with your client, your potential client or your potential customer, a number of times before they pick up the phone to you, right? You want them maybe to see you on Facebook, you want them to see some like video content you've produced, or some blog, or maybe you've got a mail campaign, maybe you've got a funnel, more ideally, right? If you've got a funnel, you can qualify as you go down the funnel until they reach you and they're ready to do business. If you have that kind of setup and you're producing content and you can measure where your lead is, then you can get much better quality leads that are much later in the stages towards doing business. And that will just get you a better conversion rate, because these people are aware of what you do. They're basically at the point where they call you, a lot of the time they are at the point where they do want to do business. It's just a question of price, or, you know, a question of understanding the detail of the service, right? So that's another thing to think about. Two other things I thought about just now as well. One is, you need to think about the source where you're getting your leads. In some cases, a lead source may be one that generates a lot of leads, but it may not be the type of leads that you necessarily want to deal with, right? Because they may not be as good quality, because the barrier to entry to get the leads is pretty low, right? Like, you could have, for example, a Facebook form, which brings in the leads really easily because it captures all the data for you. But because of that, you know, you might get a good percentage of people that just aren't really that interested, just sort of want to have a chat. So they're not quite there yet and ready to purchase. And you don't necessarily want to have loads of conversations with people that aren't quite there yet, because it burns up a lot of your time. You almost want people to become aware of you and then get to the point where they want to talk to you. So that's worth bearing in mind, right? And in which case you want to introduce those pre-qualification steps before that type of platform. The last thing I thought I'd mention, and it's relevant to platforms, is that in some cases the platform itself can make you can help with the qualification process. For example, if you're looking at something like Google and you have a very specific interest that you can define in a search term, like, let's say in our case it might be SEO copywriting for property developers, or it might be SEO copywriting for financial services or something like that, which has got a few qualifying points to it, like it's SEO, it's copywriting, and it's to do with this particular group of people, let's say. That in itself will, once the advert, hopefully if you've got it all set up properly in Google, displays to that audience, right, these people are searching with that specific intent. The more specific you get, the more likely you are to reach the right person. That in itself will majorly increase the probability that leads are more relevant to you. So I hope that helps. There's a few things to think about there, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.